Thanks very much, Paula, and we really want to see you as the next Member of Parliament for Dewsbury, and a huge warm welcome to all of you here. It's great to see you. I'm very proud to be here with my Shadow Cabinet colleagues and also with our elected mayors and our council leaders, of whom we're so proud. Since 2010, under Ed's leadership, there have been more than 2,500 extra Labour councillors up and down the country. And it has never been more important to have a Labour councillor and a Labour council on your side. So whilst the Tories have been making things hard for people, pronouncing a recovery which nobody ever sees, doing, as Paula said, the cuts really unfairly, our Labour councillors and our Labour councillors have been on people's side, backing them up in the most difficult times. They've been getting on with planning and building of more homes. They've been getting on with protecting children and giving them the best possible start in life. They've been backing up local businesses, and that relationship between local councils and business is so important. They've been trying to protect the elderly from what the government has been doing. But actually, we need more Labour councillors and we need more Labour councils. And on the 7th of May, across England, more than 30 million people will have a vote not only for the general election for the government, but also, very importantly, for council elections across 279 councils in England. This is a very important opportunity for people to elect Labour councillors to carry on innovating on things like on the environment, carry on trying to make their communities safer places for people to live, working in partnership with an increasingly overstretched police force, supporting the things that make communities tick, like art, like culture, like sport. So we need more Labour councillors. Labour in government is determined to tackle the things which bear down on local communities and make things so difficult for people. The cost of living crisis, the epidemic of job insecurity, all the problems that are pushing the NHS further back. But we want in government to be supporting local councillors and local councils. We want to be in partnership with local councils to deal with the unfairness and the lack of progress that there's been under this government. So I'm delighted that we're here this afternoon to sign the covenant that is with Labour nationally and with local government. And to tell us a bit more about that, I'm delighted to introduce the Shadow Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, who actually believes in the importance of local councillors and local councils, and that is Hilary Benn.
Well, thank you very much, Paula. Thank you, Harriet, for that introduction. Welcome again to the Tetley and the wonderful Leeds Central constituency. Now, to be precise, as well as fighting the general election, Labour candidates are going to be fighting in 35 city councils, 48 unitary authorities and 194 districts, and also 5 mayoral contests. So that is a lot of candidates that we are hoping to get elected, and we want to add to the 35 local authorities that we've won control of since 2010, and of course through the 2,500 seats that Labour has gained in the last 5 years. Now, as Harriet said, having a Labour council really does make a difference to people's lives. Council tax is lower. It is Labour councils that are building more social and affordable homes, and it is Labour councils that are leading the way on the living wage, and I applaud all of those Labour authorities that have introduced it or are on the way to making it a reality. But the truth is that councils want to do a lot more. Now, there is a tide flowing in this country in favour of devolution. Councils and the communities that they represent, very simply, want to have more say over the decisions that affect the places in which they live and the way in which their economy is going to grow and develop. And that is why we're here today, because a Labour government will pass power back to communities across England, reversing 100 years of centralisation. We will devolve £30 billion of funding from Whitehall and give councils the new powers that are set out in our better plan for every region in England, the covenant that we are signing today between a future Labour government and local government. And Chris and Chuka and Michael are here to tell us about what that's going to mean in terms of funding and skills and economic development and transport. And Keith Wakefield, the leader of Leeds City Council, and Anne Weston, the leader of Derbyshire County Council, are going to tell us about what they're going to do with these powers. What are their hopes and aspirations for the future of their local authorities? Because we are going to give, in addition to that, councils new powers to build the homes we need for our children and our grandchildren. For all their talk, for all the high-vis jacket photo opportunities, let us just look at this single reality. Fact. This Tory-led government has completed fewer houses in any year since they came into office than Labour built in every single year of our 13 years in power up until 2010. Now that is a shameful record of failure. We have longer waiting lists, we have house prices rising out of reach of young people who would like to get a foot on the housing ladder, and we've got a better plan for house building to build by 2020 200,000 houses a year, and it is going to be local authorities, Labour-led local authorities, that will be providing the lead. The last thing I want to say is this, that this is a devolution offer for the whole of England, not just for some places, not just, well, I'll give you a bit of this and a bit of that, and I'll devolve you some powers as long as you do what we tell you to do, which is the approach that the government has taken. All we are asking is for councils across the country to come together and collaborate, as we have seen with the 5 combined authorities that are already in existence, here, of course, in West Yorkshire, in the Liverpool City region, in Greater Manchester, the Sheffield City region and the North East, and the county regions, and Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire have now brought forward their plans to establish their own county regions. This is a really significant moment which is going to change the way in which decisions are made in England, and it is only Labour that is offering local government in all parts of England a better plan to give you and your community, wherever you live, more of a say over what happens. It's now my great pleasure to introduce the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Chris Leslie. Chris.
Hilary, thank you very much. And now the Treasury message. I just want to reaffirm that the next Labour government and a Labour Treasury will deliver the biggest devolution of economic power and funding to England's city and county regions in a generation. And our plan isn't just about ensuring that every part of the country and all working people can benefit from economic recovery. It's also about making sure that we back our cities and our towns and all the regions of our country, which are, of course, the engines of growth and job creation. Unless we get economies in all corners of the country motoring ahead and moving forward, we won't get that prosperity for all and for everybody in our country. Now, our plans go much further than those announced by David Cameron and George Osborne. Unlike the Tories, as Hilary has said, we're not going to shortchange areas just because they don't go for the particular style of governance or constitutional makeup that is favoured in Whitehall. We want every part of England to benefit from our plans, not just the chosen few. Empowering city and county regions to improve productivity, create high-skilled, better-paid jobs across the country means giving local government the powers to invest in critical infrastructure, support local businesses, and improve employability as a route to achieving this, especially when there are fewer resources. Now, we have to just make our own assumptions and presumptions about what's in George Osborne's mind, but maybe when faced with those focus groups that were deriding his reputation, particularly in the north of England, the Chancellor hastily decided he was going to claim that it was all for the north, it was all something he'd been planning all along. The thing is, people across every English region know that the Conservatives are only for the few, not for everybody, not everywhere. Funding cuts to local authorities, as Paula was saying earlier on, have hit the north and less advantaged areas in particular. Households living in the 10 most deprived local authorities in Britain have suffered cuts in spending power 16 times greater than those in the 10 wealthiest areas. In 2010, the government scrapped the regional development agencies, leaving most regions without the strong economic voice that they need. They've, of course, spent several years subsequently trying to put that mistake right, but with no clear vision for most of the country. And instead of learning the lessons after the abolition of the RDAs, they've taken a very piecemeal approach with devolution just at the margins, making a series of claims about their plans, much of which, of course, have turned out to be totally unfunded and little more than rhetoric. So, as Hilary was saying, there is a better plan from Labour, and it is about devolving funding. Our proposals go beyond the limited offer that the Conservatives have, with a major transfer of funding from the centre to localities, adding up to £30 billion over the 5 years of the Parliament. And it's done in this way. First of all, employment support, making sure that city and county regions would commission the work programme to get the long-term unemployed back to work. Second, on transport and housing, making sure that local and regional infrastructure funding is devolved to city and county regions, and Michael's going to say more in particular about transport in a moment. Third, on skills, city and county regions allocated funding to commission 19+ further education provision based on local commissioning plans. Then we move into business support, and Chuka will say more about this in a moment. Funding of business support and enterprise projects would be devolved as well in return for matched funding from the private sector or other contributions in kind. And of course, in addition to all of this devolution of funding, we've committed to go further than the government in devolving taxation by allowing local authorities to retain 100% of additional business rates raised through growing businesses in their localities and in those regions. So together these powers form the basis, I think, of a proper, strong new deal for city and county regions, and we want them to take these steps forward. A Labour Treasury working closely with not just the communities and local government department, but with every single government department focused on these principles: fairer funding for local authorities, long-term multi-year budget settlements so that local authorities have the chance to plan ahead as well, which is also very important, supporting rather than obstructing local government reform where local authorities want to work and collaborate together, and greater freedoms over budgets and ring fences working within the public services. So that's the sort of Treasury perspective, and now I'll hand over to Chuka, who's going to say more about city, county and regional growth strategies. Chuka.
Thanks very much, Chris. I just want to say three things. And the first thing is this: in many respects, what we're trying to do in this general election, and we know that our country needs change, is to turn politics on its head. Because what we're trying to do, all of the shadow cabinet you've got here, is to ensure that we get into power so that we can actually give it away. This country is far too centralised. 70% of spending is actually done through Whitehall. The OECD average for what is done at the centre is about 48%, to put in perspective what we look like compared to our international partners. And what we're in the business of doing is empowering people, empowering our communities to be the masters of their own destiny. The second thing I just wanted to say is, look, I think so often in politics we talk about the how and the what, and we don't actually say why we're trying to do what we want to do. Hilary talked about the democratic imperative for us to do what we want to do in terms of giving power away. We know that people trust decisions that are made locally far much more than they do in terms of the decisions that are made at the centre. And we also know, let's be frank, that people in this country are fed up with the kind of Punch and Judy partisanship that you see in Westminster. And it's often, I think, at a local and regional level that we see people putting that to one side. See Joe Anderson sitting in front of me, just gave the freedom of his city to Michael Heseltine during this Parliament. But we have managed, our leaders in local government, to put aside some of these things, build consensus and deliver the goods for people locally, which people like. That is the kind of politics they want to see more of. But of course, there is a massive economic imperative for us to devolve power down as well. We know, and I say this very often to my own constituents, that children growing up in my constituency are not just going to be competing with children here in Leeds or Newcastle or Edinburgh when they graduate or finish doing their apprenticeship, they are going to be competing with their peers in Shanghai, Mumbai, Singapore. And we know that the best way that we can ensure that we succeed in this global market is thinking about where have we got a competitive edge, where have we got a comparative advantage, how do we specialise. Now, you are much better placed here in Leeds to know what that is than we are in number 1 Victoria Street, where the business department is. You understand what your niche is, and so we need to give you the tools to be the masters of your own economic destiny. And look, the third thing I just wanted to say is I'm very proud of our record. I think we should talk about our record a lot more. We started off this whole thing with devolving power in London, Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland. And of course we set up the RDAs. But we now need to finish the job, and our intention is to finish the job in England. We look at what has happened over the last 5 years. The abolition of the RDAs was a huge mistake, in my view. We saw the institution of a regional growth fund, which was supposed to be the flagship regional growth strategy for this government, which has been mired in chaos and delay. And the local enterprise zones have not delivered the extra jobs that were promised. That is why our plan not only to establish a £30 billion pot of money, which we will devolve down, but also to allow combined authority areas to keep the growth in their business rate is so important. And just a final thought. I think so much of what we're trying to do politically and economically is help people navigate through globalisation. And part of the problem there is a crisis of politics is because people doubt our power to actually do anything about that and make globalisation work for people. And I think if people feel powerless and they doubt our power, let's give them more power to help them through and deal with the globalisation that we're facing. And on that point, I'm going to pass over to the next Secretary of State for Transport, Michael Dugher.
Thank you, Chuka. It's great to see so many people here in what everyone knows is God's own county, even if it's West Yorkshire rather than South Yorkshire. But with transport, there is a very big choice at this election. It's a choice between more of the same or big changes with Labour. On rail, you've heard us set out the action that we're going to take in terms of those inflation-busting rail fares, but we also want to see the biggest reforms to the railways for a generation, ending the failed franchise model, more public control of the railways, a strong passenger voice, a railways that is fit for purpose, including here in the north of England. On roads, we're going to do something about the terrible state of our local roads, what campaigners have rightly called pothole Britain, and we'll also implement a proper long-term strategy to boost active travel, supporting cycling and walking, putting that agenda at the centre of future policy making. But today I want to talk about the big changes that we're going to make on the buses. Now, about how Labour will regulate the buses in the English regions, as happens in London, to empower city and county regions to strengthen local bus services and to integrate the transport network. We understand that buses are the lifelines of our communities, our cities, towns and villages. Over 2/3 of all public transport journeys are now taken on the bus. Yet under this Tory-led government, our local bus services are in crisis, with services worsening here in Yorkshire and across the rest of England too. Under David Cameron and Nick Clegg, we've seen over 2,000 bus routes cut since 2010. At the same time, fares have risen by an inflation-busting 27%. That's more than 5 times the growth in average wages. Here in Yorkshire, there are now over 1 million fewer miles of local bus services compared to 2010. Across England, there are now 30 million fewer miles of local bus services compared with 5 years ago. So we've got to do something about this crisis, because who does it impact on the most? The young, the elderly, the least well-off, the disabled, people in villages and rural communities, businesses on our high streets. It's clear that, like the energy market, the bus market is broken and isn't working for the public interest. The majority of the bus market is dominated by just 5 firms, yet all the power lies with these companies and not with communities and passengers. That's why Labour has a better plan for every region. We will regulate the bus market, like in London, handing power to our city and county regions so they can determine bus routes, set fares, integrate transport services. Whereas in London, where buses are regulated, passenger journeys went up 107%. In the rest of England, where buses are deregulated still, passenger journeys have dropped 37%. So we will reform and simplify quality contracts, and we will reform and devolve bus subsidies. This will help incentivise the use of quality contracts and ensure that every city and county region has the leverage they need to negotiate a comprehensive deal with the bus companies. Operators will no longer be able to decide just to run on the most profitable routes. Through cross-subsidisation, they will have to run routes that are vital for local communities as part of that overall contract. And we will ensure that ministers can help back up city and county regions through the delivery of a quality contract if necessary. Now, it's not just the Tories and Lib Dems who are against Labour's determination to regulate the buses. Some of the big bus companies, like Stagecoach, want to keep the big public subsidies, keep making the big profits and paying themselves the big bonuses, and keep the power when it comes to setting routes and fares. If fares are going up and bus routes are being cut, that's our problem. That's what they tell us. In the North East, Stagecoach have threatened to pull out all their buses off the roads simply because the local transport authority in Tyne and Wear want to get a better deal for their communities by securing a quality contract. That is totally unacceptable, and it's precisely why we need Labour's changes. Now, we know that David Cameron and Nick Clegg refused to stand up to the big, powerful vested interests, but Ed Miliband and Labour will. So we want to see bus services that provide a better service for the travelling public, better value for money for the taxpayer, where power is in the hands of local communities and passengers, not the big bus barons. This is how it works in London. And if it's good enough for London, it should be good enough for every other part of England too. It gives me great pleasure now to introduce the leader of Leeds City Council, Councillor Keith Wakefield. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And if I'm not too late, can I welcome you to Leeds and welcome you to this wonderful gallery which Hilary spoke about? Because in many ways, this gallery symbolises the resilience, imagination and leadership that many local authorities here have shown in the last few years. I'm delighted to see so many colleagues here. In the combined authority across West Yorkshire and York, we've lost £470 million. And I think, Paula, you made that point earlier, and it has been devastating on public services. But despite that, I think we've got a proud record working with businesses, working with the LEP. And because people have emphasised the youth, I'll give you some examples of what we've achieved. We've actually managed to, in the devolved work contract of 16 to 18-year-olds, get 80% of young people into jobs or training. Compare that to the 30% of the national contract. We've managed to halve the NEETs from 18 to 24, from 28,000 to 14,000 in the last 2 years. We've managed to actually continue our journey for our ambition to be a NEET-free city region. And needless to say, we've also helped to create 58 to 60,000 jobs in the last few years. And the jobs that we created with LEPs, we do at a cost of £7,000. Compare that to the National Audit Office average of £52,000. So what it demonstrates, as Chuka said, proud of our achievements, but look at our record, because we are showing that Labour leaders and Labour councils can actually bring about a different outcome to young people's lives. And what we really need to do better, as Hilary suggested, we need to actually do more than rhetoric. We want to balance the national economy. But so far, it's certainly in Yorkshire as a whole, we've had rhetoric about powerhouses. The substance behind that is negligible. There's been very little support for our ambitions that we were told we should have. In November in Leeds last year, we were told by this government, Let's be ambitious. It's unconditional. Go for it. Well, Yorkshire got a very timid deal. And frankly, Yorkshire have been let down by this government in its offer of devolution. So today is a really proud day, historical day for all of us as Labour leaders, all of us as councillors and mayors, because what we've heard today is real passionate commitment to change and to trust local councils. I'm not going to go into all the deals because Anne's already mentioned that. But let me give you an example. We've talked about the impact of skills on young people's lives. The other thing is fiscal devolution. Frankly, if you haven't got fiscal devolution, with the growth of the business rate, for many of us, you haven't got devolution. You've got delegation, you've got devolvement, but the real key to all of us in local government, in managing the changes that we're trying to bring about, has to be fiscal devolution. So I'm really pleased I heard that today from Chuka and colleagues today. The other one, of course, is the transport. And I'm glad I've got James Lewis here today and many colleagues. If there's one issue that makes a big difference to our economy, it's transport. And many of us are fed up representing rural and urban areas with the deregulation of the bus systems now. It is absolute shambles. In areas I represent, you can wait 2 hours for a bus. In areas where it's popular, you can have 3 every 20 minutes. And I'm delighted to hear that we are going to bring back democratic accountability and control of the public transport system in our country. We want to be the same as London. We want to be able to shape the future of transport needs. And we've already started to give concessions to young people. Because if anybody says, when you ask a young person what would make the biggest difference to the quality of their lives, to jobs, they all say transport. So I think today has been a really exciting day in those big issues. And I'm delighted that the Shadow Front Bench have been able to make those statements. And I look forward to working with a Labour government on May the 7th and bringing about change and improvement to the lives of Yorkshire people. So thank you for coming on. I want to introduce Anne Westman, the leader of Derbyshire, who's going to explain a little bit more on these skills and the other debates that we've had so far. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm really pleased to be here today representing the counties of England, and it's great to hear from Keith about the successes in West Yorkshire. You know, the Tories are not really serious about devolution in my view. They've got a very narrow focus on the core cities and the city regions that surround them. They don't really, which is surprising given the politics, they're not really interested in counties. I have to tell you that the county areas, the county regions make a huge contribution to this country's economy, and they could do a lot more if we had the powers that the Tories are just at the moment simply offering and not always offering genuinely to the cities. Because when decisions are taken locally, they're cheaper and they're more effective than when decisions are taken in Whitehall. What we need are the whole levers of power. What we've got at the moment is like trying to work with one hand tied behind your back. We can do certain things on certain aspects of the economy, but we can't join it up together. So we need to create the jobs, we need to get the buses to take people to the jobs, and we need the houses for people to live in so that they can live in the area close to where they work. Now, I want to talk a little bit about housing because that's very topical at the moment, isn't it? And Labour in local government's got a strong track record in terms of delivering housing. Labour councils have delivered more houses and affordable houses in particular than Tory and Lib Dem councils put together. And yet we still have a housing crisis. David Cameron's presided over the lowest level of house building during peacetime since the 1920s. How shameful is that? And he just seems intent on looking at the demand side and not the supply side. We need to create a situation where local government, who know the area best and understand the spatial strategies for their area, can start to get houses built, houses for sale, houses for rent in particular, because we've got a generation of young people that we are letting down at the moment. government. And we need to make sure we get the types of houses we need in the places where they need to be at prices that are affordable, whether that's to buy or to rent. So I'm really pleased with the Labour manifesto offers that are going to be tackling developers about land banking. If they own the land for building, they should be building on it. And I'm really pleased about the house fund that we're going to be operating through the ISA scheme as well. As the 10 councils together in Derbyshire, we can deliver affordable housing by unlocking those stalled sites, regenerating brownfield sites and addressing rural housing need as well. And together with our 9 colleagues in Nottinghamshire, at the heart of the country, we've got a 19 council area absolutely committed to this agenda. Now, that's why I'm so pleased to be standing here, actually, because people said it couldn't be done. People said combined authorities are for cities. It'll never work where you've got multi-tier local government, where you've got counties and districts and then cities as well in the mix. But we're making it happen between us. We're making it happen. DCLG have got our plans. We've had conversations with Hilary a couple of weeks ago about our devolution deal, and we've got the ambition and drive to deliver this. Greater Manchester authorities have been working on this agenda since the 1980s. Yorkshire authorities have been working on this for many years now. We've been working on it in Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire for 15 months. And that shows what you can do when you've got the ambition and you've got the dynamism and you've got the commitment and you've got the encouragement from your party that we know that when we come into government in May, we'll be able to put these ambitions into practice. I want to talk a little bit about the wider East Midlands as well, because the East Midlands as a region has got massive potential but gets overlooked. We've never really had a fair share of the funding. In Derbyshire, our strength is in transport engineering, and we've got some real global leaders in that, Rolls-Royce, Toyota, Bombardier, and the supply chain that goes with it. But the economy is largely based beyond that on small and medium-sized businesses, and they're not getting a fair deal from this government either. So we want to work with them in sectors such as food and drink, aggregates, creative and digital, and in Nottinghamshire on healthcare and so on. So it's great to see the next Labour government going to be backing businesses with new regional banks to provide funding to support enterprise and jobs. And that'll help us create tens of thousands of jobs in the heart of the country across the 2 counties and 2 cities in Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire. So we're at a crossroads, aren't we, for local government? If we get another Tory government, I think it could be the end of local government as we know it. The public services that people rely on are being squeezed to the limit, and another 5 years will see many of them gone. But we've got the prospect of a Labour government offering us some hope and some opportunity. And together we can make this work for the people of Britain. It will re-engage, as Chuka said, re-engage people with politics. It will make it worth going out to vote, because you know in your area that things can change for the better and that you will have a part to play in that. So bring it on in May, and we'll be knocking on your door, Hilary, to get our deal firmed up. So thank you. I'm handing back to Hilary now.
I shall welcome the prospect of you knocking on my door, I can tell you, Anne. Right, we're now going to sign a better plan for every region, the covenant that we've talked about today. And Harriet, if you would like to come up, and Jim. Well, Jim, you're over here. And I think we're all going to sit down and the 3 of us are going to sign.